Alright, I'm back to talk about Xbox a little bit. I wanted to record this video a couple of days ago, but some things came up, and it's not like it's any less relevant now, considering that this is sort of an ongoing saga that will continue well into the future. We are coming off the release of Redfall, and it has been pretty much a disaster on every level. It is a very bad game that launched with very bad performance issues, and even though there is, confirmation that they will continue to work on it, they'll continue to support it, and then, people saying that it should have been delayed, I don't think anything is going to save this game. I think at its core, it was just not a good idea for Arcane to do a big open world shooter with loot and co-op, and if they weren't going to have the systems in place to support most of those things in any meaningful capacity, in addition to things like gunplay feeling terrible and AI being some of the dumbest AI I've ever seen in a game. But this has created a larger conversation around Xbox, and fairly or unfairly, and I don't think it's unfairly at this point, Redfall was supposed to be this sort of cut point where obviously we're 2 years into this console generation, essentially 2.5, and the highest profile release for Xbox was Halo Infinite. That was not great. It's been supported better over time. I know some people like the campaign. I did not like the campaign, and I stand by that. But that was also just 343 disappointing people with a Halo game, which is not exactly a news story. And neither is, the alternatives of Forza was good, Flight Simulator's good, that's also not really new. This is sort of the same old Xbox story where they have, perhaps more niche genre games doing really well like Forza, but then their big swings are usually big misses or just fine. I would put some of the last Gears of War games in that category where Gears 5 was just fine. In terms of this current era, though, this was supposed to be a big moment where one of Microsoft's acquired studios was going to produce something, that demonstrates that Microsoft, too, now has highly competitive first-party studios. And this one seemed like a slam dunk because it's Arcane, and Arcane usually makes, if not amazing games, at least pretty good games. I think my favorite Arcane game is Prey. Dishonored obviously got a lot of press when it came out, and I like Dishonored also. Deathloop, I didn't really like Deathloop as much, but a lot of people did. It was in the Game of the Year conversation, at least. And the contrast between that and Redfall, which Redfall is genuinely one of the worst AAA games I've ever played. I don't quit games, I said this before, and it was so bad I can't keep going. And I've never really experienced that, even with a lot of other bad games I've played. What's happening here is that there's now a narrative that if that fails, there is an immense amount of pressure on Starfield, but then it's already kind of damage control mode, where after this came out, Phil Spencer did a big interview with XCast where it was shockingly honest. I like Phil Spencer as a person, as an executive, because he always says all the right things, because he seems honest and forthright. I don't necessarily agree with this idea that because Xbox has failed, it's time to call for his head and blah blah blah. I think it's a little more complicated than that. The Xbox, Xbox is still making money. It's just this one thing. All right, sorry, two things: making good first party games and selling out of consoles. Those things aren't really happening. But the longer this goes, the more I worry about the longer term prospects of Xbox as a brand, because I don't really know if this is going to be changing anytime soon. And of the many points Phil made in his talk here was that, yeah, there is a lot of pressure on Starfield, but at this point, there is nothing Starfield could be that would change the console race, by itself. He said the game could be an 11 out of 10, and people aren't going to just sell their PlayStations and convert to Xbox. That is not realistic. And a lot of this, he seems resigned to the idea that Xbox is just not going to compete on the level of PlayStation and Nintendo in the console race now. This is not exactly new, but it's probably the most stark I've heard this lay out. And he talks about how the Xbox One generation, and like he was not the head of things during that launch, that was like the Don Matrick era of Bundled Connect. Like that was a very bad generation to lose, because before that it was 360 PS3, and that was very even. Like it was a total competition. But the Xbox One era, the botched launch, the lack of exclusives compared to Sony for an entire generation, that really made them fall behind. They got outsold at least 2-1 that generation, and that was the time where they just stopped reporting Xbox sales. And people were like, "Oh, well, they're not that important because they're moving to these other avenues." They stopped reporting sales because they were selling badly. They would keep reporting sales if they were selling well. That's the end of it. But now this new generation was supposed to turn that around. They spent $1 bazillion on studios. They are currently trying to spend 10 times that on Activision Blizzard, which may no longer happen. And that was supposed to produce some real results for them. It is not impossible that this will produce these results in the future. I just wrote a thing today about how, even through all this, I still think Starfield is probably going to be good. I think it's going to launch with a lot of bugs and performance issues, and it may even be delayed again, but I would be shocked if we had like another full Redfall situation on our hands. Like, it may have a rocky launch, as a Bethesda game is wont to do with bugs and stuff, but I still have to believe that Starfield is going to be a good game at its core. Maybe it'll be a Cyberpunk situation where it's a core good game just botched by a few things at launch, and then over time it'll be better. That just seems to be par for the course now. It's like things launch in a rough shape. They get fixed over time. It's very annoying, but is how almost everything works now. I wrote another game, Jedi Survivor. Like, that's an incredible game. It is terrible performance issues right now, and is essentially the only thing wrong with the game, in my opinion, which is very unfortunate. And then in the future, we have things like Hellblade 2 that looks good, but these other kind of projects are a little far-flung, and, you know, there's rumors about rocky development on all of them, and who knows what a new Perfect Dark game will look like, what a, you know, new Fable game will look like, and these are really old IPs being handled by totally new studios, and we've seen pretty much nothing from them, and so I think it's hard to put too much faith in that. But there's this idea that, you know, Xbox is still fine, like, they don't need system selling first-party games because they're not worried about selling systems as much anymore, and they are looking to the future with cloud gaming and Xbox Game Pass and subscriptions, and the real competitors are Google and Amazon. I don't buy it. I wrote about this a couple of days ago, and I don't know if this repeatedly stated philosophy is going to pan out the way they think. So I'll take these, you know, these are linked, but I'll take them together. And Xbox Game Pass is approaching a ceiling. At a certain point, everybody within the Xbox ecosystem who wants Game Pass is going to have Game Pass. And I will agree, if you own an Xbox, you really should own Game Pass. There's no reason not to, because it'll pay for itself very quickly. Like, it is one of the best deals in gaming. And I'm not even going to talk about Game Pass profitability right now, but so far it does seem to be profitable, but this is before we're greenlighting all these, we're producing all these ridiculously expensive blockbusters. It is a great deal, and everyone who owns an Xbox should own it. But the ceiling on that, sorry, I'm shaking my camera. The ceiling on that is pretty low because the console base is pretty low. And I just don't believe that there is that sizable of a market out there on PC and in the cloud, which I'll get to in a minute, that is going to result in the kind of continued rapid growth that Microsoft is going to want to see for Game Pass. It has been, you know, Xbox reported that Game Pass subscriptions hit 25 million. I wrote this down, I think January of 2022. It is about 18 months later, and while we've heard like some of the financials about Game Pass and revenue, they have not reported a new Game Pass number in 18 months. And they've not said they're going to stop reporting Game Pass numbers, but it is something they used to brag about consistently because they were experiencing incredibly rapid growth. And they were very proud of that. And now this reminds me of when they stopped reporting Xbox sales because those were down and it didn't look impressive anymore. In this case, like, I would think they probably would have announced 30 million subscriptions. I don't know. Like, I would be stunned if they were just waiting to bust out like, oh, it's 50 million subscribers now. Like, I don't think you would wait that long in between announcements, which is kind of weird, nor do I know how they would even get that far. And I think we're just going to be continually seeing a slowing of Game Pass subscriptions once everybody within Xbox SS has one, and then the PC market, the cloud market is pretty limited. I don't think there are that many people who do not own an Xbox who are going to separately subscribe to PC Game Pass or separately buy Game Pass on the cloud. Like, I don't think there is this huge swath of potential gamers out there who won't shell out $300 to $400 for a console, but will pay whatever dollars a month, $100+ a year for, access to Game Pass on the cloud. Like, I don't think if that market may exist, but it is not large, and I do not know how much it is going to grow. And also, fundamentally, why do people subscribe to Game Pass? Because it's supposed to have good games on it, and it does have a lot of games like in its overall library, and that's good. They keep taking things out of it, so it's not like your roster of good games lasts forever. But one of the main draws for Game Pass is supposed to be that all Microsoft first-party games are launching there. So you don't have to shell out $70 like you do for every new Sony release, or I think Nintendo games are $70 now too. Everybody kind of did that. You would be getting these games for free, quote unquote. But if these games aren't good, if you're I'm on Twitter and I'm seeing a Game Pass advertisement, and what's front and center on Game Pass? Redfall. You subscribe to Game Pass, get access to Redfall. Redfall's terrible. That's a terrible ad because Redfall is not a good game. So until you start having, better games on Game Pass at the level of a Sony or Nintendo, it's not really even as attractive of an option as it used to be. And I think originally, once we had this, a while ago, a lot of AAA games were there. Some new AAA games were launching there. That still happens sometimes, but it's mostly indie games or smaller games like Hi-Fi Rush. That was a great Game Pass launch. That was perfect for Game Pass because I wouldn't have bought that game, but the fact that it was on Game Pass was great, and I wouldn't have played it otherwise. And that was a fantastic game. But those cases are few and far between. And in Redfall's case, it's like, thank God this was on Game Pass, because if I had spent $70 on that, I would be furious and selling it back to GameStop or requesting a refund. Does Microsoft do digital refunds? I think they do. Sony doesn't. That is not really... I don't really think that, Game Pass could say that, oh, we don't need, system-selling games. No, you don't need system-selling games, but you do need Game Pass-selling games if you want to continue this growth. Growth that I don't think is even all that sustainable based on the current ceiling that Game Pass has. Then this is related to cloud gaming. And this is the other idea, that Microsoft is so forward-thinking that they're investing all this tech and money into the cloud, and cloud gaming is the future. Okay. Is it really the future? Because I have been hearing about the death of the console for 15 years now. This was assuredly going to be the last console generation, and everything would just be a streaming game, or we'd be downloading it onto hard drives on our TVs or something, or tiny little boxes that didn't need, full console systems, and we'd be running everything remotely. Not only did that not happen, it is very, very clear that video game consoles are more popular than they've ever been. PlayStation 5 had supply issues, but now that it doesn't, it is going to start dramatically outpacing PlayStation 4. It is almost assuredly going to become one of the best-selling consoles of all time. The Nintendo Switch is already one of the best-selling consoles of all time. Continues to sell well, even though its tech is a decade old at this point, purely because of how good the games are from Nintendo and how convenient it is to be a mobile piece of hardware. So this idea that we're all going to move to cloud gaming and nobody wants a console anymore is stupid and not true. Everybody still wants consoles. Everybody still likes consoles. Or even if outside of consoles, people are still playing games on their phone, which is technically hardware, or their PCs, which is hardware. Hardware is not going anywhere. And just because we have seen the entertainment industry moved towards streaming, game streaming is not the same thing. And that has been abundantly clear in a few ways. Like, first of all, the tech isn't there. If you want like a pristine premium game experience, the tech is not there. And the internet infrastructure is not there in many countries that are not like South Korea, where internet is amazing everywhere. In the US, relying on consistently high-speed internet so your cloud gaming setup is going to work at all times is not realistic. That is not a thing that is generally going to work out well, which is why very few people, almost no one, is like solely relying on some sort of cloud gaming experience to be their main point of gaming. Like, if they have cloud gaming, it's like a supplement to what they already have. If they want to play, a game in a different room where they don't have a console, or if they want to play on vacation or traveling or whatever. But we have like very clear evidence that cloud gaming is not like ready for prime time remotely. We had Google Stadia, which invested an exorbitant amount of money in trying to build, the world's premier cloud gaming service, and like that had some issues. Like, one problem with that was its model, where you think you're going to be subscribing to something and just have access to this full library of games, but then you were subscribing to something and then you had to buy all the games individually, which was stupid. But fundamentally, people just didn't want cloud gaming as their sole thing. So Google Stadia at best was like an addition to other things. So like I used Stadia a few times to play Destiny remotely from a hotel instead of installing it on my laptop, like something like that. But like, it was never going to be my primary way to play games, because cloud gaming still, has performance issues, has some amount of latency. I think Microsoft Cloud Gaming is actually worse tech than Stadia was a little bit. So, this idea that cloud is the future for gaming reminds me of like, oh, crypto is the future of money, AI is the future of creativity. Like, okay, I get that everyone gets hyped about certain tech, but like, there is nothing to demonstrate that that is true about cloud gaming. And Microsoft itself made a whole argument in their Activision Blizzard case that after they were blocked because of cloud gaming concerns by the CMA, that cloud gaming is an insignificant portion of the market. And it's tiny. It's like a fraction of the VR market, which is a fraction of the hardware gaming industry market. Like, it is a tiny piece of the puzzle. Like, even if it has grown like from zero somewhat, Microsoft itself is saying it's like a tiny part of the industry. Like, I think the CMA thinks they're being like forward thinking, and they think, oh, the cloud is the future, like surely, so Microsoft will be dominant there. And like, they think they're being slick, but like nobody really agrees that like blocking the Microsoft deal on those grounds was anything that made any amount of sense. Like, even critics were like, what cloud gaming? They're blocking for cloud gaming? And like, that's how ridiculous it sounds, because that's how nascent the market is. And like, I remember, 8-10 years ago, whatever it was, 7-8 years ago, when VR first hit, and everyone, all the VR people were like, oh, in 10 years, VR is going to be the mainstream form of, entertainment, and it's going to replace consoles, and all games are going to have to move over to VR, and it's going to be this, like, I'm looking at these analyst projections, and like, VR is supposed to go from like $10 billion or whatever to $220 billion in like 2025. And it's like, okay, like, that has not panned out. Like, VR isn't dead, but it has not evolved past a very fixed niche in the market. And we have Meta, which has badly damaged the entire concept of VR because of its stupid metaverse bullshit. And, something like PSVR 2, that is great tech. That is actually fundamentally great VR tech for the price, and yet it may have trouble outselling PSVR 1 because just nobody wants VR. Well, not nobody, but like very few people want VR, and very few people less than that want to pay more for a VR headset than they did for the PlayStation 5 that they need to run the VR headset. Not great. And then there's a couple of fun games for it, but like, the ecosystem is not there to support consistent releases of VR. And it's similar for cloud. Like, maybe the games are there, but like, the tech is not there, the adoption is not there. So what I'm coming back to is like, there are two narratives that, Microsoft doesn't need to compete in the console space. Well, I guess it's one narrative. Microsoft doesn't need to compete in the console space, and they don't need to put out, the number of huge quality first party games that Sony does to sell systems, because it's too late. They're not going to catch up in console now. But they're the most forward thinking video game company because their future's in subscriptions and Game Pass and the cloud. And I feel like that may have been a more convincing argument a couple of years ago when Game Pass was just experiencing absolutely explosive growth that like nobody was coming close to. But now it seems like the best case scenario is like Game Pass new subscriptions are going to dramatically slow down, and Microsoft may end up making a consistent amount of revenue from Game Pass, and it may not like lose them tons of money. I still am not 100% convinced that's going to remain true if they keep greenlighting AAA blockbusters that do not sell independently of Game Pass, but we'll see. And then I think there is too much reliance on the cloud and too much ignoring of history, where so many things have, like, game streaming has been predicted to eclipse consoles in the past. VR has been predicted to eclipse consoles. Consoles are more popular than they've ever been. Video game hardware, PC gaming, mobile gaming, all of that stuff using hardware is more popular than it's ever been. And something like cloud gaming remains just like, an appendage of traditional gaming. It is not replacing anything. Not in 1 year, 2 years. I would say not in 10 years. I don't think so. Everything's always 10 years away. We're 10 years away from VR adoption. We're 10 years away from the cloud taking over everything. We're not. It's not going to happen. Maybe let's talk in 50 years or 40 years, something like that. But these it's just 10 years away predictions have not panned out. And Microsoft relying heavily on those kind of predictions, I do not think is going to benefit in the long term. I think Xbox as a brand can kind of survive as long as it wants to, because again, this is Microsoft, a trillion-dollar company that can essentially do whatever it wants, and it's not like Xbox is just burning money or something, or it's not, they're not going to pull a Google Stadia with Xbox and just shut it down and refund everyone that's ever bought an Xbox game. So, like, I'm not worried about that, but I just don't think this idea that Microsoft's, backup plan of becoming this dominant player in subscriptions and whatever, and they're going to be just as strong as anyone doing that, I don't see that happening. So, all this talk about what's going to be a good game, what's not going to be a good game in the future, that's like kind of a separate issue. But fundamentally, yes, I do think Microsoft needs to have good games, and they need more of them than they have. And it would be nice if they stopped producing underperforming games, which we have seen so far this generation in many high-profile instances. So, anyway, that's what I got for now. That was long, but I've been bottling at least some of this up because this narrative is very weird to me. So, yeah, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.